When you see something in life that could be better, and you've recognised there's a way of delivering it, I'm kind of, for me, it's just become a little bit of a zealous mission to drive people roughly in that direction. I'm never going to change everything, but I think we can just make it more fun. And life is too short to be sitting there doing boring stuff that's not necessary. There's enough boring stuff in the world.
That was Christian Hunt, and this is the All Things Risk podcast. Welcome back, or welcome to the All Things Risk podcast. My name is Ben Catania. This is my show, and this show is all about risk and uncertainty. And these two things are lenses, and they're also themes that I use to explore all types of topics. And I do this because I want all of us, and that includes myself, to embrace uncertainty masterfully. All right. I want to get right into our latest episode, so let's do exactly that. Today, we talk about human risk, and that is the risk of people doing things they shouldn't or not doing things they should, and that definition comes from my guest, Christian Hunt, the founder of Human Risk, his company, which embodies Christian's mission to bring behavioral science to organizations so that they and their people can do the right things. And this whole area, as you'll hear, is incredibly important, and it involves a lot of counterintuitive thinking. And that's because big organizations try to get us to do things very often without any type of understanding of how it actually feels to do them. We are complex creatures. We're sometimes irrational. And as you will also hear, as technology advances, so does the world's exposure to human risk. And that's why Christian is disrupting the way organizations get their people to obey rules and to do the right things. Christian is absolutely brilliant. He was a former head of compliance at a large international bank, and through his work, he saw how things weren't working. For example, why sending an authoritative email wouldn't get people to obey a key policy. And he set out to change things by bringing behavioral science into the mix. And his approach challenges orthodoxy, and it's fascinating to understand. We cover all of that. We get into what human risk is, Christian's wonderful 5 rules of human risk, AI, machine learning, technology, cognitive biases, Christian's own entrepreneurial journey and vision, and much, much more. I am sure that you are going to enjoy this one. So let's get into it. Here is Christian Hunt. Yeah, Christian.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. This is going to be a lot of fun, and we finally got to make this work. So, welcome. What I would like to do to start off with is, just get you to explain a little bit about who you are and what you currently do. But we'll get to what you currently do. But just basically, now you founded Human Risk. So, when you get asked that question, what it is that you do, how do you respond?
Yeah, so I specialise in looking at how you can bring behavioural science into risk and compliance, culture and ethics, and look at deploying it in that space.
Yeah, that's cool. A nice answer as well. You didn't start that way, and I want to talk about your journey because you worked for many years in banking, and you had a great title, Managing Director of Behavioral Science for a little while, which that's a cool title. I've never seen that one before. But you studied French and German, and so how did you get to be doing what you do?
Right. So it's kind of probably worth going back to the beginning, because I've sort of been asking myself that question, and I was one of those really annoying kids that would always ask why. And so my parents kind of indulged that, and I've always been fascinated by people. And so I did French and German, but it's a literature degree. And of course, we don't write books about things; we write books about people. So literature is kind of all about understanding people and that piece. And I think that kind of has always stuck with me. I then went off to become an accountant, which was sort of a counterbalance to that piece, do something sensible that was kind of business related. And then I ended up in banking, various roles, and then the banking piece took a kind of a regulatory turn, and I had various opportunities to go and work at different regulators. And then I went out from a regulator back into the industry. And so what I started to realise was that the way the industry was kind of looking at compliance, which was the area that I was working on the other side, was kind of didn't sit right with me as an individual, and I found it really clunky and awkward. And I'm sure any of your listeners that have a compliance function within their organisation will know what I'm talking about, right? It doesn't feel human.
Yeah, they're like the police. They're like the
right, and it's
obey the rules.
It's the worst bit of branding ever, right? Anything that you add the word officer to that makes it worse, right? Compliance officer doesn't sound great, and so. As I was in that role, and I was doing compliance and operational risk, so for people that don't know what that is, operational risk is basically all the things that might go wrong. So in the context of a bank, that is not the financial stuff, so not lending money to the wrong people, but looking at cybersecurity, fraud, all the kind of risks, things that can happen. And as I was doing that joint mandate of compliance and operational risk, what I realised was that I was in the business of influencing human decision making. Because organisations can't be compliant of their own accord. So it's the people within it that determine that. So if you want to get an organisation to be compliant, you've got to persuade the people to do the right thing. And the largest single cause of operational risk is people, either causing a problem in the first place or kind of making it worse. And so as I looked at those disciplines, I just realised that a lot of things we were trying to do involved persuading people to behave in a certain way or trying to influence the way they took decisions. And yet the way that was happening was kind of didn't sit nicely with me, either as a recipient of this, because as a compliance officer you have to lead by example, or as the person in whose name a lot of this stuff was being done. So I was heading up this function and policies were going out with my name on it, emails were going out, and I kind of went, this isn't great, right? It doesn't feel human, doesn't connect with me. And I just thought, look, I could complain about this or I could try and do something about it. And so I recognised that if we were trying to influence people's decision making, why wouldn't we copy other people that were doing that? And so that brought me into the field of behavioural science, which I'd been interested in for ages, and I'd just been reading all the books, but I hadn't really put it together as a kind of discipline. And so I just realised the skills that you see deployed by advertisers, by kind of transport authorities, and by governments, highly relevant to what we're doing. So I started this kind of project of what I call bringing science to compliance. And how can we think about better ways of influencing people? And unsurprisingly, if you think about how people actually react to stuff and how people actually make decisions, you can start to build things that are much more effective and much more kind of convincing. And so you can kind of infuse compliance in people without them even realizing it.
Yeah.
And so that was the kind of genesis of it. And I just pushed this theme further and further and further, and sort of said, look, we really should do this. And they kind of kindly said to me, well, why don't you go do this full time, which is how that job title appeared. And so I did that for about a year within a bank, and I then decided it was time to kind of take the show on the road and go to a larger kind of piece. And so I've taken this concept of human risk, as I called it, out on the road, and I now act and advise other companies on doing the same thing.
That's cool. It's such an interesting concept because you're right. I work professionally. My day job is in the risk space, and I recognize all that stuff that you're talking about. People in organizations design policies based on what they want people to do, but without any thought around how actually people make decisions. And then meanwhile, the whole marketing world, they get it. They understand how to influence and push those buttons and cognitive biases and all that stuff. And we're actually often very manipulated, and we don't even recognize that. And here you have, you're trying to get people to do the right thing within an organization, whether that's like, don't, break laws, don't, and yet, you just, because we told you so. And it just seems like this you couldn't have any, if you had a spectrum of functions that operate on the basis of, how people actually think and do things versus how you want them to be, like those are, you're on the opposite ends. Compliance is on one end and marketing's on the other, and you're trying to bring these things together.
And I think there's something interesting about it, which is, there is when just because it's got a legal basis or people think of it in terms of health and safety, somehow it has to be serious, and you have to use auditable techniques that look like they're taking something seriously. Whereas if you said to advertisers, you can only do serious stuff, they'd run out of material very quickly, and you wouldn't be selling many products. And so for me, it's around saying let's take those techniques of human engagement and just deploy them in a different service, and that service happens to be controlling, managing risk, or making sure that the organisation is respecting the rules that it's required to respect. But the techniques that you can use to persuade people is the same thing, right? It's exactly the same game. And we all know as kids, intuitively, none of us likes being told what to do. So, it's strange that as adults, we suddenly think that because someone's in an employment situation, that suddenly the rules of the game are different, right? And I'm allowed to tell you what to do, I'm allowed to patronise you, I'm allowed to irritate you, I can make huge demands of you in a way that in other circumstances we wouldn't put up with. And so I just sort of looked at it and thought, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a medium ground. And sure, there's going to be times when you do want to use those traditional methods. I don't want, people who are doing surgery or who are maintaining aircraft to have anything other than very strict rules that they cover. But that's very different to some of the sort of more ethical themes that we see nowadays, where actually judgment becomes a key part of it, and what's right in one situation may not be right in another. So you need people to be intelligently looking at this stuff, particularly in kind of knowledge economy roles. And so, I think if we want to get the most out of people, treating them like they're idiots, well, they need to be told what to do in every single situation doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. Yeah, I love your blog and your newsletter, and the one, as you were talking, the one thing that I brought to mind was this this organization I think that you worked for that had this dress code that was like 44 pages long, and it's just absolutely mind-blowingly ridiculous about the length of ties and what perfume you can smell, how to bathe, and all this stuff. It's just like, if I was working there, I'd be like, fuck you. Well, I'm getting a tattoo tomorrow.
Right. And of course, if you put someone in that position where you write down loads of rules, people react against that. So they find creative ways to get around it. And if you haven't thought through how you've written those rules, people will do interesting things to kind of manipulate, to feel like they have some sense of agency. And I think that's dress codes is a prime example where you kind of go, you could do a detailed list, but it's pretty counterproductive.
Yeah.
And does it make people feel good? No.
Yeah, Malcolm. Have you been listening to Malcolm Gladwell's podcast?
Revisionist History. Yeah,
the one about the Jesuits who have this concept of casuistry, where rather than based on making a judgment or a ruling based on a principle or a rule, you look at the context of each case, and that offers a much more human, I think, way of deciding things. And it strikes me that we need a little bit more.
Yeah, but I think it's almost reminding. I mean, dress code's a good example, right? So you get some nightclubs that say, no jeans. Mm-hmm. Well, what does that mean, right? Mm-hmm. That could be everything from a really scruffy sort of ripped pair to something that's quite smart. Mm-hmm. So that for me is a really silly rule that doesn't determine whether you're smart or not, but it's an attempt to kind of codify the uncodifiable. And I think that situations matter. So I always sort of joke, it's acceptable for me to walk around in my underwear at home. I wouldn't dream of doing it in a supermarket because the context is very different. Mm-hmm. And so as we look at trying to influence people's behaviours, the context matters, the intent matters, and things. So we need to have a kind of flexible regime around that. Because if you over-codify stuff, you'll get bad outcomes. And you'll stop other things that you do want to have happen, not happen.
You build so many codes that they'll be eventually in conflict with one another.
Right.
Yeah. That's very pertinent, but sometimes we lose organizations. Not we. I think maybe organizations lose sight of this stuff.
And I think it's if your job is to determine a certain outcome, then you've got to be accountable to someone for that outcome. So what happens is logic kicks in. Yeah. So I will do things that look good. So the auditor will come along and assess what I've done, and I've taken a very logical step. And so writing a long policy makes a lot of sense from an organizational perspective, because you go, we have covered ourselves, but everything. But of course, that doesn't look at the other side of it, which is how easy is it to comply with. And unsurprisingly, one of the things I found is that the longer the policy is, the less likely it is people are going to read it, right? It's perfectly obvious. And yet that thought process, then everything's done for the convenience of the organisation. And I think there's a little bit of, particularly in an employment situation, we've employed you, so you'll just do what we say. Which sort of works, it's kind of North Korean logic. And that's fine if the thing you're asking them to do is binary, it's very simple, it doesn't have any nuance to it whatsoever. There's certain situations where that's fine. But in most of the situations we're in, there is a heck of a lot of nuance and thinking that we need people to do. And if you effectively say to people, I want you to switch off your thought processes, then you will get the human equivalent of people slavishly following the GPS unit and driving into a river. We see that happening all the time because people just switch off. And so if you want to engage people, particularly with a risk environment that is kind of fluid and new challenges coming on a daily basis, we need to get people to think. And we don't do that by overly codifying the world, pretending the world is black and white when actually it's grey.
Yeah, let's bring in some concepts here. I love your 5 rules of human risk. So maybe we could step through some of them. But actually, maybe we can first talk a little bit contextually about what's going on in the world with things like AI and machine learning and the future of work. And we had this Twitter exchange today, and I was wondering about, with AI, the types of jobs and the types of things that we will be doing will be the things that will make us more human, or the more interesting work will be stuff that makes us more human, like creativity and intuition and things that AI will hopefully never be able to do, but you never know. And it, this whole concept of human risk, maybe if you could talk a little bit about technology and how you think this fits in with technology.
Sure.
And that whole that
yeah. So I came up with this brand of human risk partly in response to the fact that everybody was talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotics, and so there was this focus on technology, and technology was going to solve all the problems, and from a risk perspective, it was going to cut down on sort of basic human failings, because humans get tired and they make mistakes, so machines don't make mistakes, and they do exactly what they tell, and they don't get tired, exhausted, depleted. And so there was this kind of pervasive noise I felt around the robots are coming and they're going to do all this stuff, and therefore people are less important. And actually, as I started to look at it, what is going wrong nowadays in the world? There's a human being somewhere involved in the process. And so even if you look at technological processes, someone's got to program those machines. And of course, where it's machine learning, the data they're learning from is human data, which if you pick the wrong data set, and if you look at the historic data sets that we have, there's some very simple stuff around. There's much more male data than female data because of the nature of the roles in society. So we will start drawing conclusions based on data sets that are biased. And so what we're putting into the machines and therefore scaling up is potentially challenging. And then, of course, when you look at the machines taking over those tasks, the machines are going to have outputs. And so those outputs are going to have to be dealt with by people. So ultimately, there'll be a human decision maker at some point in the chain. And so we need to understand what's coming out of those machines as much as we do as to what's going in them. So the black boxes will do all the stuff, but there's going to be human involvement around it. So as I looked at that, I kind of thought, actually, as technology takes over, people are not going to play less of a role, they're just going to play a slightly different role. And so, the machines will do the basic computational stuff that we're not good at. They'll spot patterns we could never spot. So this is all good stuff. But what are we going to do? Well, the answer is we'll be doing things that involve judgment, emotion, nuance that machines can't. And so I looked at a few examples of algorithms that in theory are a good idea, but in practice not, deliver some interesting outcomes. So if you look at the Uber surge pricing algorithm, so that's the one that, kicks in when there's more demand than supply, the price goes up. So economically very logical. And whether you like it or not is another question, but it does exactly what it's supposed to do. The challenge is it does exactly what it's supposed to do under all circumstances. So if you have a terrorist incident or a natural disaster, the algorithm doesn't know that, and so it jacks the price up. From a reputational perspective for Uber, that's terrible because it looks like you're profiteering off the back of a
terrorist incident.
And so in that circumstance, there's a good example of where a human, you need a human to override that, because you couldn't even program the algorithm and say, look, in the case of a terrorist incident, don't do this. Well, what is a terrorist incident? How? And it's down to people's interpretations as to whether what you're doing is appropriate or not. So that's one example. And then another one I thought was really interesting was after one of the terror incidents here in London, I think it was slightly lazy journalism, but they looked at Amazon's people who also bought algorithms.
Right.
And so the simple bit of journalism was, let's go and have a look, see how easy it is to buy equipment to make a bomb. Mm-hmm. And so they went onto Amazon and looked at it, and the algorithm, the people who also
often bought together.
Well, it gave you a bomb-making kit, in essence. And of course, that's not what Amazon wants to do at all. Now, I don't know how that came about, whether the algorithm is like scanning news or whatever, but you've got an outcome there that is terrible from a perspective. It's not what it's designed to do at all. And so as you look at these things, we're going to have much more control around this stuff. So human judgment becomes even more critical, because we're spending less time doing those kind of routine tasks that the machines can do, and more time doing the stuff they can't. That becomes a supreme matter of judgment. And so I think human risk increases, actually, ironically, in a world where there's more automation and more kind of computational skills being brought, rather than decreasing.
That's an interesting observation. Yeah, because we think, it's going the opposite direction. But
right,
actually,
and it
we're
is
dealing with I think we're dealing with all kinds of things that we never faced before. So what could be more human than being able to process those things and make judgments?
And it's I think technology also offers, every single employee in an organisation now has the opportunity to cause reputational risk for their employer. So in the old days, if you go way back, it was the CEO or the C-suite that would go talk to the media. And so there was no opportunity for a junior employee to have an outlet where they could kind of do something stupid. And now a single customer service operative, and we've seen it with the United case, where the people get dragged off the plane. Right? Any single one employee can do something that's reputationally damaging because they do something on social media, or something they have done gets transmitted on social media. So we're in this world where I think technology, yes, it mitigates huge risk in making things safer, but it's also equipping us all with kind of reputational weapons of mass destruction. One badly thought out tweet causes a whole load of problems that wouldn't have been there before. And so I think this is, it's a really interesting time, and you get into a whole series of thoughts around, the relationship between employer and employee. So what rights do employers have to curtail your activities? And in the old days, it was very clear, right? They kind of owned you, if you like, during the working day, and then you'd go home, and that was kind of your private life. And now, of course, with smartphones and email access the whole time, there's sort of expectation in many cases that you're contactable. Suddenly those lines are being blurred, and working from home creates a whole lot of it. And so I think there's a lot of these dynamics that are shifting that we really need to think about, and that involves having a very human approach to some of these challenges.
Yeah, that's really astute observation. And one that I think, when you think about, the thing I was thinking about is, what are the things that humans can do that artificial intelligence will never be able to do? And those are the things that are sources of risk, but also where maybe from an organizational perspective where value might come from, or where and so we were talking about things like, I suppose, creativity. Although creativity is
it's interesting, right? Because you can get AI can produce art.
Yes.
It can produce
poetry,
music.
yes.
And so on the one hand, I struggle a little bit with this idea that it can never do it. But I think it's it's sort of, and it'll produce interesting stuff that we would never think to produce. So in a way, it could be even more creative. Now that's some dangers there. Very interesting example on AI going a bit creative is on Amazon, for example. There are a lot of products that don't actually exist until you buy them. So T-shirts, as a good example, where people produce designs that they will then print if somebody buys them, and they get AI to generate them. So you get some very interesting. So how is the Amazon AI to know, for example, that the swastika is an inappropriate symbol? Because, and from you can tell it, that's a symbol of Nazism, so we better not have that. But of course, that symbol appears in sort of ancient, and so it might take it out of that context. And you can imagine combinations of things. Particularly where it involves people or religions, that just we would just go, oh my god, that's really offensive. the AI won't know that that's offensive. And so I think there's sort of huge it will see combinations of things that we would never see, and so you'll get these really interesting things. And some of the outputs I've seen, art outputs and poetry. Some of it is obviously created by a machine, but you can see examples where you cannot tell whether something's been created by a human or by a machine. But I think there's always that kind of human element, and I think when we look at sort of emotional decision making and questions around how we engage with people. So I meet you, I shake your hand. I have to decide whether do I give someone a hug or not. That's a very nuanced decision, dependent on culture, how well you know them, and the history between you. And I think that's something that's really hard to tell machines, because back to my earlier point, we're kind of illogical. And we do things very differently in very different situations. And so trying to, if you look at driverless cars, it's very easy to program a driverless car to read road signs, to kind of react to the environment, and notice it's raining, so they slow down. The bit they struggle with, there was a great article which we can put in the show notes that looked at the challenges of this. The problem comes with people. So people don't behave logically. So programming a driverless car to react to a cyclist going the wrong way down a one-way street, or an emergency service vehicle that is sitting behind you in traffic where you're required to go through a red light, or you're required to go onto the pavement, or you're required to do something that is technically illegal, but in the circumstance you'd override. How do you program that driverless car to know? Because the computations I'm doing as to whether it's okay for me to drive on the pavement, I'll be looking, is there anybody there? Am I putting myself in? There's a whole load of computations going on that I think machines would struggle with.
But somewhere it would be like a value judgment. So what if the option is either veer onto the pavement and hit a child, or veer onto the oncoming lane and hit the oncoming traffic, or run over the cyclist, or what? Is it what? How do you decide?
Right, and it's sort of, there isn't necessarily a right answer, and I think that's the bit that we are very, very good at computers. Sometimes we're terrible at it, right? We draw completely the wrong conclusion. But programming that stuff, I think, is really hard, and it's super reactive, and that's why I think for some time we're going to find there are things that people will just have to do, because the effort involved in automating them is going to be so extreme, and we will have some hideous unintended consequences. The driverless car having an accident is probably the tip of the iceberg, because if we think about, that's a visual thing. If we start to think about algorithms and what they do behind the scenes, and some of the sort of outcomes that are going to be determined going forward by machines, and I worry particularly about, look at insurance.
Okay, you're talking about like societal outcomes.
And so the more the data that's out there on us, you could put the medical profession and the insurance industry can start to use that data for quite interesting outcomes, and you could get some really bad outcomes from a societal perspective in terms of racism, in terms of sexism, in terms of making people uninsurable. So we have to think very carefully around this stuff, and I think there's going to be there's a lot of a push to automate stuff, and because we can. And I think some of it we ought to sort of sit back and just go, does that make a lot of sense? Now, my alternative is, of course, people do it, and they come with their own weaknesses and foibles, but that that's always been the case. And so I think we're just in a really interesting time. So bringing all that together, I just sit there and go, human risk is going to increase rather than decrease.
Yeah, and we keep hearing a lot about, well, maybe just to get back to the loop around AI and what AI can and cannot do. And I think one of those areas, again, you mentioned it, emotions. Right, I'm not sure an AI would ever be able to console someone or be able to understand when someone's making a decision based on emotion or fear or greed or whatever. But maybe. But
well, I think how does it work? Well, the answer is it takes data, and of course that's what we're doing. Right, we're taking the way that I react to someone who's crying is based on all the things I've learned up until now, and my own experience of crying. And so I will weight that according to sort of personal experience, whereas AI will come along and every data point is generally equal. And so again, what are you putting into that data thing? So somebody's crying. Do I give them a hug or not? What do I say to them? And in some circumstances, if it's a small child being petulant, that might be a different reaction to Ben's welling up because he's just had some really bad news about something. We would react to those two things differently. Machines probably can't make that differentiator.
Yeah, and I think you also mentioned inspiration. I don't see a machine being able to inspire.
No, because
a workforce or your or another human being.
Right, and it's it's judging the mood. You kind of anybody who's done a presentation will know you kind of know when you're bombing and you know when you're doing really well, and you can kind of adjust accordingly
based on body language, based on all these cues that we're getting subconsciously.
Right.
Yeah. But then again, maybe 5 years time,
right? And
everyone's going to be following some bot for inspirational whatever.
Yeah,
who knows?
And look, there are plenty of examples of where we don't know. The best. There are lots of customer service interactions that we have where it's largely machine driven. Now, I'm not talking about the really bad chat bots where you're talking to a machine, but there's a lot of customer service interactions are, there may be a human at the end of it, but there's machines doing stuff behind the scenes. They are getting better and better, and the interface piece might look solid because maybe it does come through a person, or maybe the interface they've built is right. But what's going on in the black box might be difficult, and I think there could be a really dangerous bit where we sort of, it feels like it's a human decision because of the way it's presented. But actually, it's a little bit more worrying around some of the stuff behind that. So I think it's an interesting space.
Yeah, it is very interesting. Let's maybe canter through the rules, the 5 rules of human risk. The first one is human risk can be managed but not eliminated. Yeah,
so I should probably... So the rules of human risk is really my attempt to kind of put down some things I think people aren't thinking about. Okay. And so this isn't meant to cover every aspect of human risk. And I should say, actually, I haven't really defined what I mean by human risk. I deliberately chose a really broad piece, which was to say, the risk of people doing things they shouldn't or not doing things they should, right? Recognizing that activity and inactivity can be equally dangerous. And so that encompasses everything from people being evil and deliberately doing wrong to people just being tired and screwing up. It's looking at the whole totality of kind of human errors. And so what these rules are an attempt to do is really to get people thinking. And so by implication, the fact that I've put in a rule means I don't think people are thinking about these things in that way. So it's a sort of attempt to nudge people in the right direction. So that first rule around you can't eliminate it, but you can't manage it, is really about saying I think there's a great tendency in organizations to go, right, we are going to control people and we're going to wipe out every aspect of people.
Like zero tolerance.
Right. Yeah. And it comes through in the language and the approach to things. And my view is you cannot stop people screwing up. That at some point they're going to do something stupid. And that might be because they're dumb, it might be because they're tired, it might be because they're deliberately doing it. But it might also be in a world where you need innovation. The only way you can innovate is to experiment, and so experimentation naturally comes with trial and error. Yeah. And so I think it's really important when we look at human risk is not to say to ourselves, let's eliminate all of it, but actually to say to ourselves, okay, there's bits that we can't eliminate. So what we need to do is to say to ourselves, what is absolutely mission critical? What do I not want people screwing up? And we focus on that. And we say to ourselves, let's manage the hell out of that and make sure that the person that's maintaining the aircraft isn't forgetting to put a screw in place. Let's make sure that the doctor is or the surgeon is operating on the right leg. That's those sorts of things. And there's a great example of this. Netflix, who, if you haven't seen this, published about 8 years ago. They published a deck, which is kind of a 21st century version of a staff handbook. And it was called the sort of culture of responsibility culture piece. And so they give people freedom, but you have some responsibility that goes with it. And they said, look, we've got some recoverable things and some irrecoverable. So irrecoverable stuff that we do not want to have happening under any circumstances is customers' credit card details being hacked, it's bullying, sexism, all those kinds of things. Yeah. Unacceptable stuff. So we focus on eliminating that, but we recognise in the rest of what we do that there are things that are going to go wrong, and that's okay, because it's recoverable. And so what I'm trying to pick out in this rule is to say we should this is not about saying it's okay for people to do outrageous things because people are people. It's about saying let's focus on the stuff that we really want to eliminate, and then we can use technology to kind of control what people can do, but we need to give them a sense of autonomy, frankly, so that they can make mistakes in a safe environment. And so that's what that rule is really driving at.
Yeah, that's it makes sense when you read it, but then when you explain it it actually makes much more sense, because it's one of
it's difficult to get them in there. I mean, they're quite sort of small and pithy, but that's intentional just to get the headline.
I really like the second one. Compliance is an outcome, not a process.
And so compliance. I mean, I said before, I don't like the brand. What I mean by compliance is people doing what we want them to do.
Yes.
And we so often get hung up around. We decide how we're going to get people to do something, and then we slavishly follow that process.
Right.
And so we have decided that the way we get people to drive more slowly is we put a sign up, and as long as we've put the sign up, job done. Whereas actually, the way the world operates is that people have different influences. So we need to focus on what are we trying to get people to do, and let's not have this primacy of, it's almost box ticking mentality of, oh well, I've done the process and therefore I've assured the compliance. It's not that simple. And so focus on the outcome that you're trying to get, and don't get too hung up, and recognize where the process that you may have created to manage that risk or to get that outcome actually isn't delivering what you think it's delivering.
Yeah, and I've often talked about, and I have this sort of a personal rule about, actually, for many things, it's process over outcome. In terms of, if you want to get faster in the marathon or whatever, you have to focus on the process, and if you focus on the process, then the outcome happens as a result of the process. But what you're talking about is different, and I quite like the idea of, you kind of don't fixate on the thing that you don't want to happen.
Right.
Figure out where you want to go, and
So I ride motorbikes, and there's this thing around, when you're on a bike, look where you want to go.
Look where you want to go, especially when you're going on a corner.
Right, because otherwise, if you don't, anyone who rides bikes will tell you this. The moment you don't pay attention to where you're going, you will come off. Yeah. Because you're focusing on you're not looking ahead of you. And I think, and I think what's interesting about your marathon analogy is that their inputs directly equate to outputs, right? So if one wants to lose weight, we just eat less. There's a natural sort of progression, providing your metabolism.
But you can't look at, you can't look on the scale every 5 minutes. If you're playing a football match, you can't look at the scoreboard every 30 seconds, or else you won't do the thing. Yeah. Right? So.
Yeah, so I think we often like to assume that human behaviour is kind of, and this brings us on to one of the other rules. There's a sort of logic to it, right? If I program people in this way, then they will do that. Yeah. And it just doesn't work like that. And so there can be, things that are persuasive for you might be different for me. Now, of course, when we're creating a kind of compliance environment, we need to cater for everybody. And so we can't be thinking about individual. But there are lots of examples where we can target things. Social media, great example. Your feed is different to mine. Even if we had the same friends, you'd still be seeing different stuff to me, because they've got this targeting thing. So they've worked that piece out. And I think if we start assuming that we can program people in a way that we program computers, we're going to get some bad outcomes. So we need to just think around that piece. And I think there's too much fixation often around, I have built a process, job done. Yeah, that's not how we operate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as well. And it's about the I love the bounty. I didn't know where this saying comes from. The beatings will continue until morale improves. And thanks to you, I now know where it came from. But it sounds like the perfect example, which is maybe you
yeah. So there's this great phrase that's come down into sort of British history, which is that beatings will continue until morale improves. This is supposed to have come from the mutiny on the Bounty, which was this nothing to do with the chocolate bar, but to do with this ship, where the captain allegedly said that this thing, which of course is an utterly perverse statement, because if you're trying to improve morale, beating people up doesn't particularly work. But that's the sort of mindset. It's kind of like, if I keep driving people, I'll get the outcome I want, and that's just not.
Yeah, I think that translates into so many other things, particularly things that we want to do. So again, self-improvement, getting exercising more, whatever. I'll exercise when I'm in the mood, but then if you're not in the mood, then you won't. So it's a bit death spiral type of thing, which unfortunately we've designed these programs in big organizations and governments, etc., along the same lines. Which,
all of this stuff starts with a sort of primacy of logic. right? And so there's a guy, if your listeners are not familiar, there's a guy called Rory Sutherland who works for Ogilvy, who's a big proponent of behavioural science and really kind of interesting thought leader in this space. And he talks about kind of the logical people.
Yes.
And he said, look, if you're a creative person, you are required to go and run your ideas past a logical person for approval. But of course the opposite doesn't happen. So accountants don't have to go and talk to creative people to justify their accounting systems. And I think, one of the things that's interesting is that we like to do things that are logical and sensible and justifiable. And anything that feels a bit weird or illogical can kind of be rubbished by people because it doesn't sit nicely in a model. So, economics would be the classic example. Traditional economics is an attempt to model a very complex world, and it has its purposes. But of course, we all do things that demonstrate that economics is utter nonsense, right? So we'll spend money on things we don't need. We will pay more for a branded product number, even if they're the same thing. And so we're not this kind of utility maximizing individual. And so I think when we accept the fact that all of these things are attempts to codify a world that's actually really complex, you can start to understand how that. But we love having logic and order, and it's sort of that's we kind of kid ourselves that that's the way the world is. It's not. Yeah. Right, it's highly nuanced and complex. It's a bit like, I always think weather forecasts are hilarious because they sort of they have to go one way or the other, right? So they have to give you an indication. But of course, where we're sat now, you can look at a weather forecast for London, which is a ludicrous concept because the geographic area is so broad that you walk 5 minutes, you get a different weather system. But they have to kind of go one way or the other, and there's an attempt to codify a highly complex natural thing that can change. And of course, all we care about is it going to rain? How hot's it going to be? How cold's it? Have I got the right clothes, basically? Yeah. But the way that they codify that is it's an attempt to make it convenient and accessible. But we all know that actually you could probably do just as good a job looking out of the window yourself and making an assessment based on your past experience than you do by looking at a weather forecast for an area that's bigger than them.
That definitely makes sense. But again, it's the dichotomy between what's done and what
right.
How things work is quite large. Let's canter through the other ones. Human algorithm is complex and often irrational is your third one.
Yeah, so I think we sort of covered that bit. I mean, we don't often think about ourselves as having algorithms. And so I like the term human algorithm because if we look at the way we try and control it, we are almost writing rules as if we are an algorithm, as if human behaviour is entirely logical, predictable, and sensible. And of course, it's not. So I kind of like this term human algorithm because it sort of reminds people that there is an algorithm going on in our brains. It's just one that is driven by a whole host of inputs that will change according to circumstance. And we're often irrational. That's not meant to be an insult and say that we're dumb. It's just that we don't do things that you would sit in the sort of traditional economically rational process. And so what I'm saying here is actually we're highly complicated. We have lots of things that go into our thought processes and lots of influences, including other people, the environment that we're in. And so as we're looking to program people, let's think about the fact that it's complicated and we don't all do the sensible, logical thing that we ought to do.
Yeah.
And life will be dull, right? So there's this, I featured there's this character, there's a sort of adult comic which came out, I think, in the 90s in the UK called Viz, when it was sort of full of sort of ridiculous characters, and one of those character called Mr. Logic who goes through life being entirely logical. And it's funny because he's a weirdo with no friends because he acts entirely economically rational and sort of responds to situations in quote unquote logical ways. We don't. And that's cool, right? Because we genuinely wouldn't have any friends or any personality if we wanted to be like that. So it's just recognising that we don't, the way we operate isn't sort of as codifiable as we might like to think.
And it's why we love to interact with. We don't always love to interact with other human beings, but there's something kind of magical about any interesting human interaction because you don't know how things will go, whether it's working with a group of people or whether or not the girl that you fancy will go out with you, whether or not the date will be great, those kinds of things. It's just that those situations are what makes life interesting, frankly.
And it would kind of be like if you wouldn't go to the movies because you would be able to predict precisely what's going to happen, and there wouldn't be those elements of...
Well, why would you go? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that said, if you look at something like a Bond movie, right, there is a predictable sequence of events there.
But there are bits in between that you don't know how they're going to get to that bit.
Right, and it's a script that's kind of been written, and then the weaponry that's there is even more ridiculous than the last time, and so there is a bit of drama in there, but you kind of know he's going to get the girl at the end and all those things. So
yeah, absolutely. Number 4 is to change behavior, change the environment, which I really, and I love this quote that you have in the which is, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower.
Yeah.
And I've never heard of this guy, Alexander de Hare.
No, I must admit, I was looking for. I always try and find, quotes. I think are great at sort of things. And if somebody said it better than I could say, it, right, let's just borrow what they've said. So this guy is kind of he's a sort of thought leader around organizational effectiveness, personal development, all that sort of space. And I just love that piece. And it's basically saying, we often fixate on people, and we identify, particularly in the
try and fix people,
right? And you go, the problem is bad people, these terrible people here. We need to reprogram the people, and you kind of go, well, people are responding to the environment they're in, and we all know that intuitively that we respond to what's going on around us. And I think when you get cases of sort of wrongdoing, if I look at in the UK, we had a big thing about politicians' expenses, big scandal. Do I think every single person going into politics is evil? I mean, it's an interesting time to be having this discussion, right? Given the chaos that's going on in the UK at the moment.
But not every single one.
But I think there's an environment that promotes this sort of thing, and I think all too often it's very convenient to be able to turn around and tell a story that the reason this has happened is it's a bad person, and we have dealt with the problem by reprogramming or extremists firing the bad person. Yeah. We don't like to accept that shit's environment, and particularly for organisations, it's tough to turn around and go, "You've created this." Right, and so I think organisation, we should start by looking and saying, what is it when something goes wrong? What is it in the organisation's architecture, and I mean both physical and sort of control and culture and everything else, that has facilitated this sort of behaviour from happening? That's not to say that we excuse people who do terrible things, but if we start from the premise of whenever something goes wrong, someone does something silly or bad, that it's automatically 100% down to them, you miss the opportunity to kind of correct it. And actually, but that's why I like the flower analogy particularly, because if you're growing weeds rather than flowers, if you don't fix the environment, you're just going to have more and more weeds. And so if you've got people responding to the environment and you don't fix the environment, you might get rid of or reprogram that one person, but someone else is going to come along and react in the same way.
Because the incentive structure will be the same or whatever.
Right.
I liken this to things like insider trading or doping in sport or corruption. And if the environment is there, the incentives are there, then you're going to get more of the same type of behavior. It's just other people will do it.
And it's that sort of, we all know that if there's sort of you go to a sort of area, there's lots of graffiti there. If it's acceptable to if that becomes a prevalent thing, more people will do it. And so fixing this environmental piece is critical. And we very often kind of focus on bad people. And there's a really good book by a guy called Professor Yuval Feldman, who's a behavioural lawyer, and he's written a book called The Law of Good People. And what he basically says is, look, we should stop fixating on writing rules for bad people, because if you're really bad, you're going to do stuff anyway, right? So these attempts to control you, if you really are genuinely evil or intent on doing something, it's going to be hard to control you from doing that. And what we need to do is we need to maximise the environment for the good people and focus on how do we stop good people who, for a variety of reasons, be it that they're cognitively depleted, maybe they've got a moral blind spot on something, maybe you've just given them a situation where it's tempting for them to do something. We've got to kind of focus on those people, because the really bad guys and girls are going to do this anyway. And so this idea of kind of, let's look at the environment and how it impacts the majority of our people who want to do the right thing. Now, I always find it astonishing. Organisations sort of, on the one hand, they spend loads of money hiring people, and then they behave as if every single one of their employees is untrustworthy. And it's it's not to say that everybody is 100% trustworthy, but it's to say how can we think about avoiding situations where we drag otherwise good people into situations that are bad, and that's all around environmental cues that we take.
So would you say things like we talked about a little bit about incentives, I suppose, what other people do, what are some of the other things?
So look, you copy other people.
Mm-hmm.
So if for example, there's a rule in the organization that says, that you I don't know, let's take a particularly bad organization that says you must be here until 6:00 on the dot, right? And everybody slopes off at 5:30. Everybody will start doing that. So you copy the behaviour of other people, and in what you do, you take cues from, just sort of your perception of the environment, and perception is really important. So I will sort of infer what a standardised behaviour is. So the best example of this is when you go travelling, go to a country you've never been to before. How do you work out which restaurants to go to? How do you work out what people to tip? How do you work out, can you cross the road when the lights are red? Well, the answer is you just watch other people and you copy them. And that's what, nightclubs exploit this. So there's a reason they artificially create those lines outside, totally unnecessary, but it sends a signal, something called social proof. You go, oh, this, subconsciously, there's loads of people standing outside. Must be a good thing to go to. They have to do that because you can't see inside the nightclub by default. So they create it outside. Restaurants will will seat people by the window to make it look like they're busier than they actually are. So there's lots of examples, and it makes perfect sense, right? But sometimes it doesn't. And so we have to just be conscious of these particular dynamics that are there. And we can transmit messages to people in interesting ways. So one of the things that I found was that if you've got a lot of people breaching a particular policy within an organization, so behavior you don't want, often the response is, let's send an email out to everybody and remind them of the policy, which is a logical response. So they're not doing it, so I'm going to remind them. But of course, actually what you're doing with that is potentially quite bad, because if you send an email to everybody saying, and I had this, I was given an email to send, and they like heads of compliance to send their emails because it comes with authority. Right, so send this email out saying the executive committee is highly concerned by the large number of violations of this policy, this is unacceptable. Right, and so the idea being, we'll remind people and then they'll behave. But of course, actually what that does is people that are following the rule will receive an email, and they'll go,
why am I following this?
Your best case scenario is they're irritated because you're patronising them on something they're doing. Your worst case scenario is they go, well, they wouldn't send that email out, and they sure as hell wouldn't reference the executive committee if it wasn't a widespread thing. Why am I being good here when everybody else is being bad? And of course, then to the people that have breached the rule, what you've said to them is, hey, don't worry, you're not the only one, because clearly they wouldn't be sending this email out if it wasn't a widespread issue. So you're in good company. So the message we're subliminally transmitting to everybody is there is widespread non-compliance. Now, there are ways you can, so one of the techniques though is to not make any references to the breaches and find a helpful way. So I reworded it and sent it in a more helpful manner that kind of that made it sound like we were being supportive. People actually came and said, thank you, that was a really helpful email. It wasn't, it was a patronising reminder of the rules, but it was framed in a different way. But actually you start to look at it and go, okay, well, if all these people are doing that, why are they doing it? And this is back to the environmental piece. Well, the answer is you go and have a look at the rules and say, why is it? Is there a good reason why people aren't complying with this rule? And the answer often is, it's really hard, it's not clear, the training's terrible, the rule, it's 500 pages worth of stuff you need to read, and it's silent on the big issue.
Exactly, and I'm trying to think of my own history of working in large organizations. At any one time, probably there are 200 to 300 policies that I need to comply with on a daily basis. How I can't remember that.
Right, and look, this is the unspoken thing. In most organizations, every single employee is probably on a daily basis is breaking some kind of rule. In the same way that and we're here in the City of London, where there are lots of ancient statutes that go back.
This is shock horror, Christian.
Right, that go back to way back when. Right, and there are rules that permit you to drive sheep over certain bridges and not do certain other things, and so there will be ancient bylaws that you and I are breaching without even realising it. And organisationally, the same kind of thing happens not because people are deliberately going out to do it, but sometimes you have whisper rules that are dumb. Right, people have written rules thinking about a certain situation. And actually it doesn't apply in certain other ones, or they're badly written rules that can be misinterpreted. And sometimes that's willful misinterpretation, sometimes accidental. So there's this thing that sort of says, if you've got lots of people breaching a particular rule, then work out why that is. Don't turn around and go, we must reprogram the people and remind them of this stuff. And if the answer is the rule is legitimate and sensible, but people, then maybe it's just people's perception of the rule. So you need to explain to them why. So I think speed limits is an interesting one. There are times when you drive along and you go, why is the speed limit so low? This sucks. You don't think that when you go past a school and it says slow children 20 miles an hour. That feels okay because they've explained to you why. And I don't think anyone would argue that that's a sensible thing to do.
You might even say, it's a little too high, actually.
Right. And I think there's lots of times where we don't explain why. And so expecting people to just intuit why they're only asked to do something when they don't understand it is a big ask. And so this idea that if we can see human behaviour as a function of the environment and say, yes, of course we will get, if people are doing things negligently, willfully, then fine, we come to that. But we don't start with the premise that it's bad people that need to be reprogramming and the environment is perfect because look, we've got all these lovely rules.
I think this is an interesting one with lots of other contexts because I was thinking about a couple things as you were speaking. One is cults. Okay, this is how cults work, right? That it's a product of the environment. So cults will get people to disown their close family and so on. So they don't have people whispering in their ear saying, this doesn't sound quite right. This kind of a thing. The other thing I was thinking about was multi-level marketing schemes or programs because it's not quite like a cult, but they have these retreats and these things, and it kind of prevents people from objectively thinking about the incentive structure that I'm working in and what the likelihood is of my own success in this thing, and making the decision should I continue with this. So I actually have a bit of a rule in any sort of organization or tribe that I'm a part of. Always keep my friends outside that are outside of it, or keep a close set of friends, so that if ever I'm being asked to do this, could be at work or it could be this club I joined or whatever, they want me to do this. Like, does that sound okay?
So they can stage an intervention,
or they can just say that sounds dude, that sounds not good, and it just gives you pause, right? Which
is interesting because that's sort of what corporate environments have with compliance and risk functions are there to call this stuff out, where people get carried away in the moment, and you want an independent voice that has no kind of skin in the game and can call these sorts of behaviours out. So I think that's a really interesting sort of self-calibration exercise. Must try that actually. Not that I'm planning on joining any cults, but because
it doesn't have to be with a cult. It could be just anything. It could be a I don't know, it could be a book club that you join that for whatever just that might it might be or someone that's asking you to pay money to do something that's probably just not a good value, or what it could be anything.
And I think the articulation I use, I'm not planning to join any cults, is interesting. Nobody's sets planning, out and goes I'm going to join this really weird cult and do strange things. It's like you just get suckered into it.
Yes.
And I think that's a really it's an interesting piece, is that we back to we respond to other people.
Yes.
And if everybody else is doing it, it's somehow acceptable.
Yes.
Which works brilliantly on the one hand in environments that we don't understand, but if you're in an environment where actually people are doing the wrong thing, easy to get carried away.
That's why also people like whistleblowers and people that just kind of stand up and say, no, this is wrong. That's what they're pretty rare, but they're really powerful in those kinds of contexts where something is going on that's not acceptable, and I'm going to raise my hand, and it might be a career limiting move or whatever,
right.
But I'm going to do this, but those people are really rare. Because just in whistleblowing, it could be career suicide.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I have huge amounts of respect for people that do that, because I think it's hard.
Yeah. Because
you are going against the grain.
Yeah.
And arguably, if your whistleblowing is worth it, you're really having to stick your neck out.
Yeah. And there's something very primal. We can get into cognitive biases, which I do want to touch on, but there's something it is very primal to be outed. Because we have this thing where we used to, and the old whatever paleo days were in these tribes, and we survived together. And so if you were ostracized and out in the wilderness on your own, then
that's not a recipe for survival. Right,
exactly. So this is a very, very primal thing of being ostracized, that we don't like it. So even though we know things are not right or whatever, a lot of us don't speak up.
Right. Yeah. There's a cost to that.
There's a cost. There's a huge cost. Yeah. So that whole environmental thing, a really important rule. But before we get into some of I want to get into a couple things. One is cognitive biases. The other one is some of the things, interventions, the things that we can do, organizations can do to manage this stuff. But the last one is just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. So the final this is the final rule because it's slightly more complex in that it has two separate meanings. So just because you can doesn't mean you should is firstly the rule that we need to instill in the target audience. There are lots of examples where people just don't think for themselves. And so, so following a GPS unit and driving into a river is a good example, right? People, all the cues are there. You're just not thinking it through. So you're in autopilot. And I think often people, particularly in environments that feel quite controlled, people will just make an assumption, either willfully or kind of because it's easier, that nobody told me I couldn't, right? There was no rule that catered for this thing. The system let me do it, so I thought it was okay. Because surely, in this hyper-controlled environment, if they didn't want me to do it, then they would have blocked it. Yeah. And of course, that doesn't work in a world where there's complexity and challenges, unforeseen things happening. We need to encourage people to be thinking for themselves. Now, you don't encourage that if you treat them like small children. If every single aspect of their life is tightly controlled, you can't suddenly expect them to develop this awareness gene that allows them to think for themselves. So that's why nurturing that's quite important. And then the second part of the rule applies to the people who are attempting to control, so the compliance risk functions, if you like, where I would say there are lots of things you can theoretically do to control people's behaviour. You can tell them what to do. You can put strict control on, and I suggest quite humbly that one needs to be a little bit careful and say, just because we could just because we have the legal right to do something, just because I have the legal right to spy on what you're doing, should I really be doing that? And I think we need to think very, very carefully. If we want the target audience to think intelligently about the risk environment, we also need to think about the impact that we've got. Yeah. And so I see lots of interventions within organizations that are perfectly legitimate from a legal perspective. They're perfectly sensible from a logical perspective, but they create unintended consequences. So just because you can beat people up, force them to do something, is that really the right outcome? And so we should really pause for thought as we intervene, because there are consequences to that piece. And I think just a little bit of pause for thought and saying, is this really the best way to do it? And don't default to traditional logic of, I'll stick it in a policy somewhere. Is there a better way to communicate that? And so this is really the final one, is about have a little pause for thought around that and just reflect on the outcomes that you might be inadvertent, and particularly unintended consequences.
Yeah, and I think anyone who listens to this, who's maybe an entrepreneur or is involved very much in kind of customer-facing work, will understand that you don't manage a business relationship by a contract, which is a similar sort of thing.
Right, yeah, totally.
Just stick it in the contract. Oh, it's like, we can't do. I'm going to stick this in the contract, or if the customer's late paying by a day or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean you just say, I'm going to take legal action now, right?
Yeah. Right, and or sticking to the speed limit when actually it's really dangerous. The speed limit might not suit the circumstances you're in, and I think it's that sort of thinking. But yeah, I agree. I mean, sticking rigidly to the contract, there are times that makes sense, but I'm just saying, think about it before.
Yeah, I'm a cyclist, or I ride a bike, what we call push bike or whatever, but I always, you kind of hear bloody cyclists always running the red lights. There are certain parts of London where it's safer for me to run the red light and get through the junction, just a lot safer than waiting for the traffic, and that's kind of why that sometimes that happens,
right?
Or whatever. We need to be a little bit more understanding of context. I guess this next, I do want to talk about. So I want to talk about cognitive biases, but more specifically around how we, maybe as individuals or organizations, can better deal with some of this stuff that we've been talking about. What should, maybe a few things. What should organizations do that they typically aren't doing?
So I think that the first thing is just the moment you start thinking from the perspective of your target audience, you will magically start to do things differently. Yeah. And so put yourself in, there's a lot of talk now about making sure we look after our customers. I think we should be doing the same thing for our employees and just thinking, okay, this is back to the just because you can doesn't mean you should. Things that are easy for organizations to do. So I need a particular outcome, so I'm going to impose a whole lot of, everybody needs to fill this form in.
Yeah.
Do they, right? What is it like to fill the form in?
What does it feel like? Yeah,
and we've all travelled. If you travel and you go to some countries and you get those dumb forms that you have to fill in, which ask you stupid questions about, are you planning to commit acts of terror, right? And you kind of look at it and go, this is ridiculous, right? Because yes, I was, but I don't want to lie on the form, so it's ridiculous, right? And so I think lots of corporate processes don't look at things from the human perspective. Say, what does this feel like? How easy is this to comply with? And so, good simple intervention is to say, okay, when you create a policy, is just get people who write policies to disclose on the front page how long it will take to read, right? Average reading time, disclose how long it will take to read, right? You're forcing because if you're writing this thing, it's not being written, machines don't read policies, humans do. So if your policy takes half an hour to read, and you can get to even logical extreme and say, actually, how many people do you need to have read this policy? What's the average wage of those people? How much is this costing the organization? Get people to think about it and give them some accountability for the sort of user friendliness of the thing you're asking them to do, the process you're asking them to go through. And all too often, things are done for the convenience of the organization, not for the convenience of the end user. Now, you can say, well, we've employed them and we don't care. And sometimes that is the only answer, right? That we don't want people in a nuclear power plant messing around with what goes in the reactor, right? So very strict rules, and we will tell you what to do, and you will abide to the letter by them. But most of us don't operate in an environment where things need to be that strict. And yet you see, it's really silly stuff like, I've seen so many times where stuff comes out on a Friday afternoon, right? An email comes out on Friday. Why are you sending it on a Friday afternoon? You're sending it on a Friday afternoon because you want to be able to do it before the weekend.
Yeah.
Right? That is useless from the target audience's perspective. And I think if we just took a little bit of kind of thinking about employees like we do customers, then you get a whole lot of, and this isn't about being massively sophisticated. It's just literally about going, is this thing I've sent them clear, easy to understand? And we've all received emails where it's kind of, some boring subject line. And then it kind of tells you, you need to do this, and it will reference some regulation or policy, right? Yeah. You've already turned me off at this point. I'm not interested in the thing. And then maybe you have to click on a website, click on a link to go somewhere to do something. That whole thing has filled me with anxiety, right? Just the email, just the subject line fills me with anxiety. And I think this thinking about what is likely to piss people off, what's going to make them anxious, because just telling me how long something will take is really powerful. So if you can send me an email and you're going to ask me a question because you need to get some data off me, tell me it'll take me 30 seconds, right? And then I can, if it's going to take me 30 minutes, fine, but just tell me that up front. A bit like, when you sort of, if you register for websites, it gives you a rough idea where you are in the process. How long will this thing take? And lots of blogs do this, and lots of newspaper blogs, 4 minutes reading time. 4 minute read, right? Yeah. And why does that work? Well, the answer is you're giving a sense of agency to the person there. And actually, you can get them to do things that will take a lot longer, providing I know. If I don't know, or it looks like it's boring, then I put it in the too difficult pile, or I don't engage with it properly. And I think there's just lots of things there where we could use a slightly more friendly language. We can, there's no reason why we can't use more pictures and make things interesting for people and explain to them why. There are so many policies out there where people, you must do this. And, if you don't explain, people won't do as good a job. And particularly where we need an element there's a qualitative element to what you want. So filling in a survey is a really good example, right? So many organizations like to do staff surveys, and you get this edict saying you must all fill in the survey, and it gets kind of sent down, and then you get chaser emails and you need to fill in the survey. Now, my argument would be, well, first off, do you need to get 100% of people doing your survey, right? Or is 60% a good indication? And actually, if 40% of your staff don't want to fill in a survey, that's a really powerful piece of data. Now, you might not know why, but you're taking very high quality data of I don't want to fill in your survey. You are turning that into very low quality data. So I'm filling out your survey under duress, because if you're filling out under duress, you're not going to be engaged. You're going to tick the middle option. Yeah. You're going to react to it and go, I'm irritated.
Or just go
right. Click.
Click. Yeah.
Right.
Scale of 1 to 5. Blah blah. Yeah. All threes. Boom.
And what you're doing is you've taken that high quality data of I don't want to fill your survey in. You've turned it into very low quality data if I'm filling your survey in under duress, and you're then commingling that low quality data with other higher quality data, which is I do want to fill your survey in. And you can't disaggregate the two. So so number one, going for 100% on a survey is stupid, right? So think about what level of now, you don't have to tell your target audience that you're aiming for a lower thing, but there are some outcomes there that are actually damaged by putting pressure on people. So whistleblowing is a good example.
Okay.
We want people to whistleblow for the right reasons under the right circumstances. What I don't want to do is to go around and say, Ben, you haven't whistleblown this week. What's wrong, right? Because you'll get frivolous nonsense. So the exercise is supported by having people engaged in a positive manner. So creating metrics that says every department needs to have a whistleblower once a week is dumb. And there are, there's lots of other topics like recycling, where, okay, if we want to get people to recycle because we think it's important from an organisational perspective, don't make it mandatory. Because people will go, who are you to tell me what to do? And yet, if you encourage people, made it easier for them, creating them, you'll get more people doing it. But you don't need 100%. Whereas, I would say, fraud, I don't want anyone committing fraud under any circumstances. That's a different outcome. And so we need to look very carefully at what outcome do we actually need and be honest about that.
Having, because you do need to have things like fraud, harassment. There are some
right, some absolute red lines.
Yeah, and I kind of liken those things as it's like swearing in speech, right? So every now and then you throw an F-bomb out there and it'll get people's attentions. But if you're effing this and effing that all the time, then it dilutes the
right, and then you have to step it up again and you get into dangerous territory.
Yeah, right. And so if you do have those red lines and absolutely under no circumstances, then it does grab people's attention. But if it's like that for every fucking thing,
right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Then it becomes meaningless.
And I think it's, people can smell what you're up to. So if you're just doing things for the purposes of covering the organisation's backside, and there is no incentive for the individual, particularly actually where that thing is, you're asking the individual to do something that you can then use against them. So, we get lots of firms have attestation processes where you must confirm that you've complied with all the policies. Okay. Right. But actually what that is it's the employer is basically saying to the employee, give me some evidence that I could use if I ever needed to fire you, because you've demonstrated you know the rule. Now I look at that and say that's not an exercise I will joyfully enter into because it doesn't benefit me in any way, shape or form. And so one has to just think carefully around that. Now, is that exercise, is it worth the paper it's written on? Does it make sense to do? But if you have to do these things, the less time you can spend making it difficult, awkward, feel bad for people, the more effective it'll be. And there's plenty of examples of things where actually if you just explain to people why, then you can often find reasons why it's in their best interest, right? Because people don't want to screw up or do the wrong thing. So you need to explain to them why the rule is in place and how. Now, they might disagree with your mechanism to try and enforce that rule. But again, that's a useful feedback piece, because if you've created an environment where, generally speaking, to do the right thing feels good, people will give you feedback and go, I don't understand, this doesn't make sense. And they can help you. Great. Now you have to be careful that people aren't trying to game it. But I think there's plenty of opportunity. If we were to treat people a bit more like adults and help them get through the journey, the majority of people will want to do the right thing. But we just make it damn hard for people because we hide behind employment lawyers, write crazy rules for things, so that in the very small percentage of situations where you want to fire someone, you've got a crystal clear. The problem is we don't look at the impact that has on the rest of the population. So for the 1 in 100, 1 in 2, and whatever it is, right? So I'm not even sure it strengthens the legal case particularly strongly in those situations, but that's the logic. So you say, if we ever needed to fire Ben, right, we've got him on the hook for all these things. What you haven't looked at is the impact it's had on the other 99. So if you had a thing
that you must be in the office at 9 a.m. and I've shown up 3 days of the last month at 9:05,
right,
and somebody wants to get rid of me, then all of a sudden you've created anxiety with everybody else, and they're like, I don't want to work here,
right? Yeah, so. And so I think it's just that's why I love this idea of the law of good people. Let's stop focusing on those little elements and treating everybody like you're the worst case scenario. And that for me is a key piece of this. And these things are not difficult, and there's lots of other detailed techniques you can look at. But typically speaking, when you look at the processes you're using within an organisation to influence people, start with email, right? A large number of emails are incomprehensible, ridiculous deadlines, make no sense whatsoever. and you kind of sit there and go, it's either hit the delete button, it's put it in the thing, or it's just ignore it and it might go away.
Yeah.
And I think that's just really bad. If we want to get the most out of people, let's engage with them, right? And not behave like they're some kind of it really is a sort of North Korean approach in many organisations, and that's not going to get the most out of people.
Yeah, I agree. I think you've got some really great stuff there, and I do want to. I'm conscious of time, but I do want to ask you a bit about what your vision for human risk is, and how you would like to see the work that you're planning on doing, how you want human vision to change things, to shape things up.
Yeah, so I think this came from a realization that the way compliance and operational risk was being done was not getting the most out of people and wasn't helping. And so this perception there is in many organisations that compliance is a business prevention unit, and risk all they're doing is stopping stuff from happening, and ridiculous rules is to kind of shift that away and say, I think it can become a real enabling force, because actually if you start to understand risk, you can take more risk if you really know what you're doing. So for me, I think there's a real positive business imperative for turning a career path that I had never envisaged for myself into something positive. So changing the branding of compliance, I'd like to literally change it, but I think is a key piece. So my mission, if you like, is to bring science to compliance, to say to ourselves, how do we transform the perception, get better outcomes? You can save a ton of cash as well because you stop doing stupid things and you get more productivity out of your people. And so that's the kind of journey I'm on, and what I'm doing is helping organizations who want to go on that journey. And typically it's people who recognize it's not working, or who worried about how much money they're spending on stuff, or whose staff are constrained. Give me a shout and we can work on this journey together. And what my experience is so far is that in most organizations there will be things that we can identify that very, very easily we can change. Now, there's some more complicated things that one can do. You can, you run trials of new ways of trying to do things, but in most organizations, there are some really basic things that can have a massive impact and shift stuff. So from a cultural perspective, I think it sort of helps. So the mission really is to kind of deliver on this, to spread the word. I'm writing a book at the moment. I'm passionate about this topic, but I want to really get involved in organizations to drive the things. So the reason I kind of left my previous role to move into this space is I want to do this in more places, with more people, kind of spread the word. And I'm on a personal mission to kind of deliver this stuff because I just believe in it. And I kind of go, when you see something in life that could be better, and you've recognised there's a way of delivering it, I'm kind of, for me, it's just become a little bit of a zealous mission to drive people roughly in that direction. I'm never going to change everything, but I think we can just make it more fun. And life is too short to be sitting there doing boring stuff that's not necessary. There's enough boring stuff in the world.
That's so cool. I absolutely love that, and your enthusiasm really comes through. Before we go, actually, I did want to ask you how you made the decision to transition from this sort of because I imagine you're in a corporate role, kind of comfortable, maybe a little cushy, and then now you've thrown yourself into this human risk project. So how did you make that decision? Was there a moment, or
I just sort of was getting somewhere, and like all things, you want a slightly bigger playground. And I just it's sort of just looking in one organisation there's a lot you can do, and there's a load more things that I would have done had I still been in that space. But I just recognised having a breadth of organisations to work with gives you greater it's like diversity in anything is a good thing, right? So you can see a load more stuff. So for me there was that. I also wanted to kind of talk a little bit more publicly around this, and that's a little bit harder to do when you're sort of in a corporate environment. Yeah.
And hard to write a book,
it's also I just wanted to be able to say stuff, and a lot when I look at a lot of things, and I've blogged around instances I've seen, and I want to do more of that. If you talk about sort of hypothetically how you could do things, that's one thing. If you start to pick real life examples, employers can get a little bit angsty around it. So there's a degree of personal freedom. There's also a little bit of let's just see if we can make this work. And I think all of us have frustrated entrepreneurs inside us, and I just believe in this topic. So what I'm doing is kind of giving it a go. Let's see what happens. Right now, I may fail disastrously, but let's just give it a go and see what happens. So I'm never sure that anybody is ready for that transition, and often in life, sort of opportunities arise, and it doesn't come at the time you want it to particularly come. just things arise and circumstances.
Timing's never right for anything.
And I really have a feeling, although I'm very conscious this is a cognitive bias in itself, that there is a real thrust behind behavioural science and thinking about things. And as we look at some of the social trends that we're seeing around sustainability, transparency, personal data, all the stuff we talked about at the beginning, I feel there's a sort of momentum behind this topic, and I want to be part of that piece. And I think, and your podcast is a great example of risk is becoming much more of a thing. And so I'm kind of going, look, if I don't get out there and do this, someone else is going to grab this, right? So I want to stop that from happening and kind of try and lead this charge. And it's also, you step outside, you have much more chance to meet other people, and there's some great, interesting people in academia, there's some other people kind of driving. I don't think anyone's quite doing exactly what I'm doing, which is frustrating,
well,
but it's also awesome.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's well, I don't know if it's perfect. It's never perfect, but it's exciting. As you were speaking, I was thinking about a couple things. One around cognitive biases. I think that whereas a lot of parts of society are talking about things like this, I did a Google search on one of the Big Four's websites. I did, cognitive biases. I did search, and literally nothing came up. And I searched the other three, and it was all in the marketing, part of that consultancy business, but nothing in the spaces that you're talking about. And what the hell?
So I get very, very confused by the fact that nobody else seems to see this stuff, right? So I sit there and go, everybody knows about behavioural science in the context of and it's interesting. Nobody has thought really about using this internally. So when you talk to companies, everybody thinks about it in the context of how I communicate with my customers, right? So exactly, marketing, sales, and certainly financial services. Behavioural science it's a little bit of a bad thing, because if you look at a lot of the things that went wrong in the crisis from an external perspective, it was abuse of behavioural science, right? So we will sell products to people who know less about those products than we do, because we're in a position, and so we will exploit that asymmetry of information. And so there's a lot of things manipulating loosely defined customers, and so it was used very much in that sphere. Nobody has kind of really been focusing as much internally, and I'm astonished. For example, internal communications in many organisations don't understand this stuff in a way that you would think this would be bread and butter to their piece. But I take comfort from the fact that when you look at some of the literature, particularly things like nudge, around that sort of thinking, a lot of those books that talk about behavioural science have a thread running through them of having to fight orthodoxy and having to fight what Rory Sutherland calls the logical people. And so there's a little bit of the journey that I'm on, or that I've I stumbled into this stuff, right? The journey that I'm on, that comes with the territory. So there's a little bit of battling and having to convince people. And so I think you really have to believe in it to be able to carry the mission forward, because there is, you are swimming against the tide. You're not being carried with it. And so any opportunities I have, and thank you for this one, to be able to talk to an audience that I think might grasp this and might understand and might find it interesting,
definitely
great from my perspective.
No, it's necessary. It's super relevant. And there's something happening, that there's a countervailing force that this fits neatly in, and it's all about things like authenticity. I think the broader recognition of things like mental health in both just the workplace and society plays into, or is part of this. People are starting to realize, actually, how we think about things is really important, and brought about by social media, and all kinds of things are happening that are I think disrupting the orthodoxies of the world.
Yeah, and I have a theory that in 20 years' time, maybe sooner, maybe later, right, that they're going to look back on us in the same way that we look back on people that burnt witches. Yeah. And go, what the hell were you people doing, right? Yeah. And actually, what I think is really terrifying is unlike the people that burnt witches didn't know any better. We know, right? We have science, we have experiment, we've got the technology. So we're on the cusp of realising this stuff. And yet so many things that we do, we're acting we're not using the full extent of our intelligence. And so whether it's the environment, we're doing things that we just know and we've got the and I think this fits in that part of the thing. Why wasn't mental mastery more important?
Yes.
And so I think they'll look back and laugh at us a little bit.
Yes.
But how quickly that happens, I don't know.
Yes. Definitely one of the things that I agree. I hope, but I agree with you that's we will be talking
that's,
like that.
That's the vision I've sold myself.
Absolutely.
Right?
No, I think it's spot on. We're also in this. Yeah, this is weird space around, and I think this plays into it, around the connection between mind and body as well. When you move around, you get these ideas that you don't if you just sat at a desk, right? And why aren't we creating workplaces that allow us to move around a little bit more? Or why not have a nap pod? Right?
Right. Back to the natural rhythm of life.
Yeah. Just be able to take a little 20-minute power nap in the afternoon. But if you just sort of sat at your desk in an open plan office and put your head on the desk and took out your pillow, people would freak out.
Right. And we are living in a world, and I think particularly technology is putting us in situations that we're not equipped to deal with. And so for me, jet lag is a good example of that. Right. We're not equipped to travel at that speed. Yeah. And I think the stimuli that we've got coming at us, the ability to communicate freely, all of these things, they're awesome, but we're just not readily equipped to deal with that thing. And I think there's a huge connection between mental health and physical health. Mm-hmm. And there's a fabulous book by a lady called Julia Enders, who she was like 17 years old, I think, and she basically had a skin condition. And she was like, I don't want to keep taking these pills for the rest of my life. I'm going to investigate why. And what she discovered was that it was an allergy. And so she did some. This is blows me away, because what was I doing at that age? Not doing sort of detailed research. She's written this book. She researched it and basically looks at the gut. So the book is called Gut, and it looks at the what happens and how does the gut help control your body. And she was eating the wrong things, which was causing the allergy. And she's made a really nice connection between physical health and mental health, which is basically if your brain is overloaded with stuff. That plays into your physical health, because the brain is taking away energy from the gut. It's diverting energy up to the brain to deal with some of these issues, and that causes you physical pain. And so there's this very clear linkage in the thing, and I just think we need to start solving some of these problems and being more authentic and true to ourselves and dealing with some of these things. Because if we don't, it's we know what happens when we bottle stuff up.
Too many of us pretend, right? Pretend that we're feeling fine, or we're that it's always sort of that we think logically and others should be thinking logically, and it's just it's bullshit. It's not that's not how the world works. We just need to stop pretending. I think that's a great way to wrap it up.
Fabulous.
But before we do, how can my listeners follow you, find you, all that good stuff?
Cool. So there's two simple ways to do that. First off is on Twitter. I'm at Human Risk Blog, and I kind of put regular content up there. The second way is I have a fortnightly newsletter that kind of looks at human risk themes. You can sign up for that at human-risk.com. And obviously reach out on LinkedIn or however you want to connect.
Brilliant. Christian, that was fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Bye for now. All right. I hope you all enjoyed that. And regardless of what you do in this world, please do yourself a favor and sign up to Christian's newsletter. And as always, check out the show notes. We've got links to all that great stuff that we talked about in this conversation. And before we go, a quick mention about our upcoming course, How to Make Impossible Decisions with Calm and Confidence. And you can already check out one of the course's modules. Just go to all-things-risk.teachable.com. The link is also in the show notes, and that module is free of charge. Finally, if you like All Things Risk, leave us a positive rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. That helps us out tremendously. That is it for now. We will be back soon. And as always, don't forget, risk is life.